The morning sun had barely climbed above the hills when a weathered pickup truck rolled slowly through the iron gates of the Hawthorne estate. The mansion stretched across 20 acres of perfectly trimmed gardens, marble fountains, and towering oak trees. Every newspaper in the state had called it one of the most beautiful private homes ever built. Only one man knew every brick personally. His name was Richard Hawthorne. At 62 years old, he had spent 4 decades building one of the largest construction companies in the country, from a single borrowed pickup truck and 5 workers who believed in him, before anyone else did. Now people called him a billionaire. They also believed he had forgotten what ordinary life looked like. They were wrong. Richard never announced when he visited his own properties. He believed buildings revealed their true character only when the owner wasn't expected. That morning he wore faded work boots, old blue overalls, thick work gloves, and a gray janitor's cap pulled low across his forehead. The security guards at the front gate were new. Neither recognized him. "Delivery entrance is around back," one guard called. Richard smiled. "I'm not making a delivery." "You maintenance?" "You could say that." The younger guard shrugged and waved him. Through after checking an old temporary work badge Richard kept for moments. Exactly like this. As he walked toward the mansion carrying nothing more than a mop bucket and a toolbox, memories followed every step. 28 years earlier, he and his late wife, Eleanor, had stood on the empty land before construction began. She had looked across the field and laughed. "It's far too big." Richard had laughed with her. "Then remind me every day that it's only a house." She took his hand. "No," she smiled. "I'll remind you it's someone's home." Those words had never left him. Eleanor passed away 8 years earlier after a long illness. Since then, Richard visited the mansion quietly every few months. Never as the billionaire owner, but as an ordinary employee. Not to test people, to understand them. Luxury had a dangerous habit of hiding problems behind polished floors. Kindness never hid. It appeared immediately. Inside the mansion, breakfast preparations filled the enormous kitchen. Chefs hurried between ovens. Housekeepers polished crystal chandeliers. Gardeners carried fresh flowers through the front hall. Nobody paid attention to the quiet janitor walking through the service corridor. Nobody except one person. A young maid looked up from folding freshly ironed table linens. She couldn't have been older than 26. Her name tag read, Olivia. She looked Richard up and down. The worn boots, the faded clothes, the old cap. She rolled her eyes. "Watch where you're going." Richard stopped. "I'm sorry." She pointed toward the polished hallway. "Those floors were just cleaned." "I'll be careful." She laughed. Sarcastically, "That's what they all say." An older housekeeper quietly glanced toward Olivia. "He's new." "So?" "Everyone deserves respect." Olivia shrugged. "Respect has to be earned." Richard simply nodded and continued walking. He had heard those words before. Many times, usually from people who had forgotten where they themselves had started. An hour later, he was quietly replacing a loose floor panel near the grand staircase when he noticed something unusual. A tiny little girl sat alone beneath the staircase hugging a stuffed rabbit. She looked frightened. Richard sat carefully on the bottom step. "Good morning." She looked at him cautiously. "My name is Richard. I'm Lucy. That's a beautiful rabbit. His name is Buttons." Richard smiled. "I had a dog called Charlie once." Lucy finally smiled back. "My mommy says we're only staying here until tonight." "Is your mommy working?" She nodded. "She cleans rooms." Richard understood immediately. One of the temporary housekeeping staff. Lucy leaned closer. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I'm scared." "Why?" "I heard someone say Mommy might lose her job." Richard felt something tighten inside his chest. "Who said that?" Lucy pointed toward the upstairs hallway. "The lady who shouted at you." Richard looked in the direction Olivia had disappeared earlier. Before he could answer, Olivia's sharp voice echoed through the corridor.
"There you are!"
She marched toward them. "What are you doing?" Richard stood. "Talking." "You don't get paid to sit around talking." Lucy quickly hid behind Richard's leg. Olivia folded her arms. "And who told you she could be in the main hall?" Richard answered calmly. "She's waiting for her mother. I wasn't asking you." She looked directly at Lucy. "Go back to the staff room." Lucy lowered her head. I'm sorry. Richard gently rested a hand on her shoulder. She hasn't done anything wrong. Olivia laughed. I don't remember asking the janitor for management advice. Several employees nearby quietly looked away. Nobody spoke. Richard noticed something that disappointed him more than Olivia's words. Good people were staying silent. He picked up his toolbox. I'll finish the repair. Olivia smirked. You do that. As Richard walked away, he heard Lucy whisper, Thank you. He smiled without turning around. Sometimes one quiet thank. You carried more value than 1,000 public compliments. Late that afternoon, preparations began for one of the mansion's largest charity dinners of the year. Business leaders, politicians, community volunteers. Nearly 300 guests were expected before sunset. Everyone hurried. Everyone except Richard. He quietly continued repairing loose cabinet hinges in the library. An elderly butler approached. Excuse me? Richard looked up. Yes? The chairman is expected tonight. Richard smiled. So I've heard. They say he's very particular. I hope he finds everything in order. The butler chuckled. I've worked here 20 years. I've never met him. Richard looked around the library he had designed with Eleanor decades earlier. Sometimes people notice more when nobody knows who they are. The butler smiled politely without understanding. Just then, hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway. Lucy came running, tears streaming down her face. Mr. Richard. He immediately knelt. What happened? She struggled to breathe between sobs. They're firing Mommy. Richard slowly stood. For the first time that day, the warmth disappeared from his eyes.